Board Member Callender.
Present.
Board Member Maskey. 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 Board Member Munoz. Board Member Munoz. Roll call.
Present.
Board Member Shim.
Present.
Board Member Wadsworth.
Present.
Okay, and then Chairperson Hirahara.
Present. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Historic Resources Board meeting starting at 12 o'clock. And could we have quick staff introductions, whoever's here?
Yes, with you today, I'm Grant Leonard, Planning Manager, and
Jessica Scholl, Associate Planner.
Thank you. Is there any public comment that are, these are made for items not are included on today's agenda? Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Denise Estrada. Today's agenda has on there training for the board, which I applaud. I provided to Jessica membership forms for the National Alliance for Preservation Commissions. That's if the city could fund $150 per year, you'd all be covered. Their webinars are monthly, and you can access them at your leisure because they're recorded. So I'm suggesting that you might consider that. I'd also like to offer 2 locations for future training if you would like to utilize offsites. The First Mayor's Education Center and the Welcome Center has space where we would host you to be able to have your board in your offsite locations. We would not charge you, be happy to be collaborations on that. Also like to let you know on February 24th, the Salinas Valley Tourism and Business Bureau hosted an event we call Stonelight Tile and Serendipity. At the event, we shared how the story of the internationally famous ceramic tile muralist Guillermo Cornizo and his association with De Anza came to light on some beautiful ceramic tile murals that are on display there. This is one of them. And that artist and the murals also tied to local Casavan family, whose owner of Stonelight Tile also play into the story. The video of the event will be on the Valleys of Anza Facebook soon, so you can all see that event. Also wanted to let you know the De Anza Trail presentation that you all received. Craig Kaufman and I will be presenting that to the county HRB in an effort to kind of keep a collaboration going with other historic preservation organizations. At your April meeting or the following one, I'd like to request an agenda slot to present information on leveraging regional heritage tourism as an economic driver. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Yeah, I have a comment to bring up, and maybe it's something that we can move to our next meeting, but I want to know what the process is that's followed for homes that are over 50 years old, whether they are on the Historic Resource Survey or not, just what's followed. The case in point is a small Spanish-style home on West Alisal Street. 307 is the address, and recently it was, I guess, demolished. I mean, it's not there. I don't think it was moved. So I'm just wondering what happened to it, why did that happen, and what steps are followed to protect our historic inventory.
Any other public comment for items that are not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll now close public comment, go into the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of approval of the minutes from the February 5th meeting. Are there any questions or comments about the minutes from the February 5th?
Yes, I think Board Member Munoz was present for the meeting, but I'm not seeing his name.
I believe he was added, wasn't he?
I think that was Mike who was at it later.
in front of me. Well, yeah, he was present, so let's make sure it's corrected that Board Member Munoz was present.
Yeah, also on the very last item where we talked about Eloise's idea of an art campaign, it says I supported it. I actually suggested that we look into forming a committee specifically to work on it. So that's a little more than just supporting it. I'd like that to reflect in the minutes.
Okay, thank you. An addition or correction to the minute? Any other conditions or corrections to the minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I so move.
Moved by Board Member Mazgai,
Second.
second by Board Member Callender. Is there any further discussion about the motion to approve the consent agenda? If not, have roll call, please.
Board Member Callender,
Aye.
Board Member Mazgai,
Yes.
Board Member Munoz,
So,
Oh, present, not sorry.
Board Member Shim,
Present.
Board Member Wadsworth,
Yes.
and then Chairperson Hirahara.
yes,
Okay.
Okay.
thank you. The consent agenda's been adopted. Is there, now we'll go into the public hearing, Historic Resources Project. And who's going to make this presentation?
So with us today is Jessica, who can give the presentation. I would entertain through the chair, if you're open to it, we might consider moving up the board member training first in respect for our city attorney, Chris Callahan.
Sure. That's not, is there an objection to moving that forward?
No.
Go ahead.
No.
So, introduction, please.
Sorry to spring that on you, Chris, but I thought we might get you back to lunch a little sooner.
No, that's fine. I had planned to be here for the full hour, so however the board chooses to proceed is fine with me. But thank you for the opportunity to come in, spend a few minutes with you this afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris Callahan. I'm the city attorney, and I was asked by staff to come give a brief discussion on some procedural issues as it pertains to the operation of this board, as well as some Brown Act considerations. And so hopefully staff has given you the full packet of information. There are several handouts there. I'll be referring to those from time to time through this presentation. And if it's okay with the chair, feel free to ask questions as we're moving along that may be more informative than just hearing me talk for a few minutes. So the handouts that you have are from Article 2 of Chapter 3, and that lays out the roles and responsibilities for the HRB, some background information as to how the HRB was formed and why it was formed. You also have the uniform bylaws from 2017 that the City Council approved, and those pertain to this board as well as all of the city's commissions, committees, and boards. You have the Mills Act pilot program resolution, which I believe is on your agenda for this afternoon as a future agenda item, right, Grant? You've been given a link to something called the People's Business, which is from Cal Cities, formerly League of California Cities, and this is related to the Public Records Act. You have a link to Open and Public 5, which is also from Cal Cities, and that's a really in-depth discussion of the Brown Act. We'll talk about it just briefly this afternoon. You have a Robert's Rules of Order cheat sheet. There should be laminated copies of this also on the dais or in the drawers where you're sitting. It's just basically a list of some more common motions and actions that this board will take from time to time. You have something called Rosenberg's Rules of Order, which I'll talk about briefly. You have something from the Institute for Local Government referring to ethics principles, which is just sort of a grounding document as to how all appointed and elected officials should conduct themselves. And then you have the City Council's approved rules of procedure and decorum, which we'll talk about, and they pertain to this board as well. All right, so starting with the establishment and the governance of the HRB, you have in front of you a portion of Article 2 of Chapter 3, and it lays out the intent and the purpose of the HRB, as well as the composition and the election of officers. And I recognized when I was putting this presentation together that there's a tension between what's in the code and what's in the uniform bylaws, and we're going to have to clean that up, I think, as we go forward. But for all intents and purposes, I would just suggest following what's in the code as opposed to what's in the resolution. It talks about the term of offices and selection of chair and officers, as well as your duties and powers. So you also have in your packets the uniform bylaws for commissions, committees, and boards. And these are rules that pertain to all of the city council's appointed commissions, committees, and boards. And one thing I want to point out in there, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, is what constitutes a majority of this board, what constitutes a quorum of this board. And that's 4 members, since there are 7 appointed members of this board. All right, so drilling down a little bit more, in the code there are 10 specific enumerated duties and powers of this board, and I've listed 3 here, which I thought were the most pertinent for our discussion this afternoon. You study and you make recommendations on the designation, preservation, alteration, or demolition of historic resources. It's important to note that in this capacity, you're serving only as an advisory body. You don't have authority to make independent decisions. All of your decisions are essentially recommendations to the city council, or in some cases, the planning commission. So you don't have the authority to do anything beyond make a recommendation. You maintain a local historic resources inventory of all types of historic resources and historic districts within the city. I pointed this one out because as part of the general plan update, right, Grant, you're going to be doing a new survey of your historic resources. And this, I think, gets to Board Member Mazgai's question a couple minutes ago during public comment about the local inventory for that one specific property, right? So as part of the general plan update, you're going to be going through a whole new survey and a whole new inventory of local historic resources. And this body will play, I think, an important role in that process. You render advice and guidance upon the request of a property owner on the restoration, alteration, or demolition, decoration, landscaping, or maintenance of any historic resource. So the designation process, as you may be familiar with, is initiated by the property owner, and this gets back to your role as an advisory body. You don't make those designations. It's a completely voluntary process that the property owner will bring forward if they're interested in bringing it forward. The city council also has the authority to make designations of historic districts, and that will come from the city council. But if any member of this board has a recommendation, certainly talk with your council member about that, and then perhaps the council can consider it and bring it forward for you to consider. I think also on your agenda you have a consideration of an alteration of a historic resource. Is that today, Grant?
That's right, the designation of the El Rey Theater.
Okay, so that's another sort of role that this board plays. You may be familiar with it, but if not, then you will be when Grant and staff bring something forward. The Mills Act tax saving program, you're familiar with this, I believe. You're going to have a discussion about it on your next agenda. And just so you know, this is something that the city council will be considering at one of their upcoming meetings, making it permanent. Right now we just have a pilot program. They want to make it permanent, but they're going to look for a recommendation from this body as to whether or not to make it permanent. So getting into sort of the meat and bones of this discussion, Brown Act and open government laws. As a legislative body, which you are, you're subject to the Brown Act, which means that all of your meetings need to be taking place in an open and public setting like we have here, an agendized and noticed meeting. That's why I provided a copy of the Open and Public 5. It's a really extensive sort of discussion of the Brown Act. I wouldn't suggest reading the whole thing unless you're really, really interested. But if you have any questions, you can always refer those to staff and they can refer them to me. The Public Records Act is also something that you need to be paying attention to, which is why I provided you a copy of the People's Business. Anything that you put in writing that pertains to an historic resource or any of your duties or powers is a public record. whether it be an email or a text or a phone log. Just keep that in mind. And the word of advice that I give to the council in particular is if you don't want it to be made public, don't put it in writing. And so keep that in mind, even if it's in your personal email account, and if it's just a discussion of a historic resource or anything that pertains to this board, it is a public record. And someone could request that, which means I'm going to come asking for your personal emails. I don't think either of us wants that. So as a legislative body, all of your decisions need to be made in an open and public setting, as I said. And I don't know why I have that slide in there twice. I apologize. So here's a discussion of what constitutes a meeting.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I had a quick question. When you said your personal email, does that only refer to things that were discussed with HRB or your entire email?
So what I would do in that situation is say, we've received a Public Records Act request for your emails that relate to the Historic Resource Board, for example. You're going to have to go through all of your emails and suss out which ones are responsive to that request, even if it's in your personal email account, and send me those.
Oh, okay.
So it's not like I'm going to look through your whole personal email account. I didn't want to give you that impression. It's just the ones that pertain to this board's business.
Thank you.
And one presumes that really means if it's an agenda item or something that was discussed as HRB, that would apply. If you're discussing in your private email with another person who may or may not be on the board about a particular home, a style, that has nothing to do with the Browns Act, correct?
It may be.
How so?
So if you're talking with your spouse, for example, about a house on Pajaro Street, which you think is historic and which you think should be considered as a historic resource, I think that may be within the purview of what this board considers, and that may be a public record.
What do you mean by public? Does it mean that if you're going to discuss it with your friend, it has to be at a meeting, or you can't discuss it? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is just in the context of the Public Records Act, right? If you're having a communication, an email communication with a friend of yours, right, about an historic resource or wanting to designate something as an historic resource, getting back to your roles and your responsibilities, right? It may, in fact, come under that first bullet point, right, where you're having a conversation with your friend about whether or not a particular property should be designated as historic. So something that you're having a communication about that falls within the scope of your powers and duties could very well be a public record.
Okay.
So you're really saying keep everything verbal?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying be very careful. Just be very careful about what you put in writing. But yeah, the safest way is to not put it in writing. So a meeting of this body would come about if there's a majority of you discussing something, right? So a majority, as we've already discussed, is 4 of you. And where a lot of folks get into trouble is in email, where one member will email a second member, right, about something that's within your purview, and that second member emails a third member, and that third member emails a fourth member. All of a sudden, unwittingly, you have 4 members having a conversation about something, and when there are 4 people talking about something in email or otherwise, that's a meeting, right? So going back to what I said earlier about being careful about what you put in writing, if you start a conversation with one other member of this board, it could very, very easily lead into a meeting unwittingly. And so just be very careful about doing that. Another way that could happen is a couple of you are at the Cherry Bean, for example, having a conversation about some historic resource, and a couple of other members walk in, and all of a sudden you start having a conversation over coffee. That could also be considered a meeting. So I would just be careful about not having a conversation with more than 2 other people about anything that may come before this board. It happens a lot. The council members do it a lot, and so we have to constantly remind them to not do it. So that's why you may see from your staff or from me, for example, an email to all of you where I BCC all of you, right? If all of you are blind copied on an email, you can't reply all and create a meeting. And so that's one thing that I recommend that staff do when they're communicating with the boards and the council and the committees, is to just BCC them so there isn't an opportunity to create a meeting unwittingly. AB, Assembly Bill 992, is something that came about a couple of years ago, in which we have to be careful about now when we are posting things on our social media. Now, just liking somebody's Facebook post or liking somebody's Instagram post could be considered creating a meeting. If, for example, one of the board members posts a picture of an historic resource that you're going to be considering, and then 3 other people like that post, that could be a meeting now under Assembly Bill 992, even though there's no discussion or comments. Just by virtue of giving a thumbs up or a like could be creating a meeting. And this is new legislation. There hasn't been any litigation about it yet. So what this means is really, still being developed, but I would just be careful about what you do on social media now, because you could be violating the Brown Act, which is something we don't want to do. So educational conferences, social or ceremonial events, community meetings are okay. So if there's a community meeting about the budget, for example, and all 7 of you want to go, that's fine. There isn't a problem with that. It doesn't create a Brown Act violation unless the 4 of you start to talk about Historic Resources Board information. So just know that you can go to some events, all of you or a majority of you, and it not create a problem. All right. Notice and agenda requirements, right? So we have an agenda that your staff puts out and gets posted before all of your meetings, and it's really important that we follow that agenda. So earlier in this meeting, Commissioner Mazgai, you, during public comment, made a comment about a property. So I just want to point out that public comment is intended for the folks that are sitting out here, for the public to comment on things, right? On anything that's not on the agenda at that point. They can comment on things as they come up on the agenda, but that's not for the board members to make their comments. I think that shows up later on your agenda under future agenda items. So board member, I think your question was entirely appropriate for this body, but I think it was just mistimed. It shouldn't have been during public comment. It should have been or should be done under future agenda items. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's something for the chair and the vice chair to remember. It's just the public comment section of your agenda is intended only for the public to comment on things. Your agendas have to be posted 72 hours in advance. Emergency meetings are the only exceptions, and I don't think this body would be having an emergency meeting for really any reason. Public comment, you have to allow public comment. First of all, they can comment on anything that's not on the agenda during the regular public comment portion, but when agenda items come up, they can come up and say whatever they want about that agenda item only. Remote participation, AB 2449, is something that was really more active during the COVID times when folks needed to appear via Zoom. The city allows the public to participate via Zoom, but not for members of the bodies. So we do need your attendance here. There are penalties for failing to comply with the Brown Act. It is a misdemeanor. Earlier this year, the council got themselves into trouble, and the district attorney actually sent a letter saying you had a problem with something that you did and you need to fix it. There is a cure process for doing or for correcting a Brown Act violation, so just keep in mind that there are penalties associated with this.
Question?
Yes.
A second ago, you mentioned that the public can discuss only that agenda item.
Yes.
If they go off the rail, what can be done? What can the...
It's a good question. At that point, the chair should interrupt them and say, the agenda topic is X, you're commenting on Y. Please hold your comments.
But ultimately, we don't have any officers here, so it would just...
Yeah, fortunately, the council has officers that could stop somebody, but sort of getting onto our next slide, let me get into that. So we have our rules of decorum, and in your package, you have the rules of decorum. And in there's a whole section on what to do in the event somebody does board Board Member Wadsworth what you just said, where they continue to talk about something that's not on the agenda. There's a script that the chair would need to read that says you are in violation of the rules of decorum, you're commenting on something that's not on the agenda, and you need to stop. So while it directly pertains to the chair, I would encourage you all to read that because you may be the vice chair or the chair at some point. So there is a process that the council has adopted that allows you to interrupt somebody and stop them. And if they continue along those lines, they can be removed from the rotunda. Of course, you don't have an officer here, so hopefully that doesn't happen, but ultimately that's what could happen. Someone could be removed, or the chair could just gavel down the meeting and say, we're going to take a break for 5 minutes if the person continues to be unruly. So there are a number of ways you can handle it. The first is just to interrupt them and say, you're off topic and you need to stop, please. So take a look at those rules of decorum. We're going through an update of them, but the majority of those rules are going to stay in place and remain unchanged. So you're subject to Robert's Rules of Order, and it's sort of a complex and archaic book of rules, which is why I provided Rosenberg's Rules of Order. It's 5 or 6 pages long, and it's essentially the same thing. It's the one that I recommend the council and the boards and committees use. It's the one that Cal Cities recommends. It's a more modernized and streamlined sort of parliamentary procedure. And it's also why I provided that cheat sheet for you there. It lists the most common motions that you would be making on this board. And so I would pay attention to just those 2 things and sort of ignore the thick book of Robert's Rules of Order. It won't do you any good. I think in one of those drawers, I also have Robert's Rules for Dummies. It's the one that I refer to whenever I have a question that comes up. And if you're interested, we can get you a copy. It's a really short sort of summary of Robert's Rules of Order, and like I said, it breaks it down pretty simply, and it's the one that I use. So your chair does a very good job of calling on people and acknowledging them to speak. That's your role, Mr. Chair, and I think the other board members just need to recognize that before you start speaking, make sure that you're recognized by your chair, and what I've observed this afternoon, you all do a great job of that. The ethics principles document in there is just something that I've provided to remind folks that as appointed officials, you are subject to certain ethical principles that regular folks are not necessarily subject to. So the city's seal and logo, these are both trademarked. They're also protected under our city code. It is a misdemeanor to use them without the authority or the prior authorization of the city manager and the city clerk. We've chased people down and have written them nasty letters about prosecuting them for using both the logo and the seal, so I don't recommend that you do that unless you get prior permission to do so, even if it's on your email or flyer or whatever. We protect those things pretty closely, and so just a brief reminder on those things.
I have a question.
Sure.
Like if you have a social media account like LinkedIn or something, and you put the link to the HRB, and then it will show that logo. Is that a violation that you're saying, I'm a member of that, and this is the link? I'm a member of the board, and it shows that. Would that be a violation?
No, I don't think so, because all you're doing is providing the link.
Okay.
So I think that's okay. But if, for example, you're sending out an invitation to your birthday party, and at the end of the email you put the city logo, which is in the top corner, left-hand corner, that's not an appropriate use. You wouldn't be allowed to use it unless you had prior authorization.
Okay.
Some folks have used it on their flyers or their fundraising events without permission, and it's not appropriate to do so, so please don't. And I know we went through that quickly. I know you have other things on your agenda, so I'll stop there and answer any questions that you may have. I think everyone knows how to get a hold of me if you have other questions. If not, I'll give you my email address if you want to write it down. It's CHRISC. It's Chris C. at ci.salinas.ca.us. Or my direct telephone line is 758-7418. So if you have any questions about any of the stuff that we talked about, or you want to get into a little bit more of an in-depth discussion, I'm happy to do so whenever you want, so feel free to reach out to me. I know this was quick and it was brief, so I thank you for your time. But if there are any questions, I'll entertain them.
Thank you. I have a question. sometimes we're asked to either endorse or support certain issues. Is there any policy about that for us as a body?
So this body can't take action to do that. It's not within your powers and duties. You're strictly limited to what's in the municipal code, and I provided you that article. So in my opinion, that would be beyond the scope of what this board can do. So I would recommend that you not do it. If you want to, for example, endorse a particular person or piece of legislation, you may do so as an individual, but not as a member of this body, right? So you couldn't say, I endorse person X for that seat and I'm a member of the HRB. You can't do that. You can say, I am Larry Hirahara and I, support this person.
Then what about things that are financial in nature? Let's say we recommend that they spend this amount of money or something like that. Is that within our...
Again, I don't think it is. It's not within that scope of duties and powers that you have, but again, you can do it as an individual. You can come and speak, for example, at a council meeting in public comment and do it there, if that was your question.
Yes. Are there any other questions from the board?
So I have sort of a question. So like if you are a person that, we talk about these issues here because we want to preserve and preserve and have the resources rehabilitated. And so if you talk to the general public, your friends or whoever about that, if you sort of encourage that, as an idea, is that in any kind of violation?
I think that's a great idea to do that.
Okay.
Certainly encourage it, but I don't think that's a violation of the Brown Act or anything like that to do so.
Okay.
I think you absolutely should encourage that.
Okay.
That's good.
Well, thank you, folks. I know you have a busy
Thank you
agenda,
very
so I
much.
appreciate your time. Thank you.
Opening it to public questions at all?
Public comment?
Denise Estrada again. We have on the board a number of architects, researchers, people who are in business. Can you just briefly describe when it is appropriate for them to recuse themselves from a topic that may come before them? That's one question. And the second is off-site training, exclusively for training, in their areas of expertise. And there is no action taken either for training or for tours of a facility. Does that need to go through a review for Brown Act? Thank you.
So if you'd like me to answer, I can. So I'll start with the second one in terms of off-site activities. Educational conferences, like a training on a subject matter that would come before this body is not a Brown Act issue, so all 7 of you could go. Again, you can't talk about things among yourselves while you're at that training. So if Denise and her group want to put on a training about something, feel free to go. Tours are slightly different. If it's something that may come before this body, then a tour may need to be agendized as a meeting. From time to time, the council has taken off-site tours to go see a project site, and that needs to be agendized. And so that's sort of like a case-by-case basis. Recusal. So if you are, I know a couple of you are architects, if you are working on something and that project may come before this body at some point, then when it does come before this body, you'll have to recuse yourself because you worked on it, you received a financial benefit presumably from working on that project, and so you couldn't also then sit as a member of this body and take action as it relates to that project, and the same would go for engineers as it would for an architect.
I have a quick question. This meeting is recorded on YouTube,
Yes.
and is that a requirement? Because let's say if we go to an off-site meeting location, is that an issue?
It is not required. It's something that we do as another means of getting the information out to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Okay. if we, for example, are an architect and have worked on a project that comes before this board years ago, should we recuse ourselves?
Yes.
Any
Okay.
other questions from the board?
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to the, is it a public hearing? Okay. So Jessica? The Historic Designation Project.
Okay, good afternoon. So we're here to consider the designation of 361 Main Street, SHRD 2024-001, and known as the Al Ray Theater. This is being presented, this came in combination with a conditional use permit that current planning is reviewing separately from this. Okay, so just do a brief overview of the history. So that was, there you can see the picture. There's the newspaper article showing the opening. It was completed in August of 1935. It was designed by a San Francisco architect, Mark Jorgensen, in the Art Moderne style. And so the interesting thing about, one of the interesting things about this building is that the agricultural industry provided this financial success in Salinas in the 1930s that fostered this development of a really rich architectural heritage in Salinas. And then, so this is a building that has been part of the 1989 survey and again in the 2016 survey of downtown. And at the time of 1989 survey, this was one of 3 theaters along Main Street. One has since been demolished. Each of these theaters took on a different aspect of the evolving Art Deco modern architectural style. And as we've discussed, this is an excellent example of the Art Moderne style. And it's a historic anchor to the 300 block of Main Street. And then in 2016, the survey indicated that storefronts had undergone replacement since 1989, but that there were still sufficient character-defining features to retain historical significance. And so I won't read the whole list, but these are the character-defining features that were identified: the raised stucco geometric pilasters, the sign, the marquee, flanking storefronts, the recessed entrance ceiling lighting, the exposed single bulbs, a terrazzo flooring within the entrance, the raised and colored ceramic tile, and then the stucco wall cladding. And then these, you'll see, these are some of the examples. These are the current photos. You can see the terrazzo floor, the light bulbs, and then the sign. And so when looking at the historical significance, we are reviewing against the California Register to determine whether or not this meets the threshold for significance and can be designated within Salinas. And based on my staff review and based on the report that was provided by the consultant hired by the property owner, it meets the following criteria. So CR1, association with significant events, patterns, or trends, and then the California Register 3, association with significant architecture and design. And then just a brief, we're looking at the historical integrity while reviewing whether or not this should be designated. And so we're considering location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And so it's in conjunction with my review and again with the consultant report, feel that the property meets all of those criteria. Okay, and then based on staff review, the property at 361 Main Street maintains sufficient historic integrity and retains the character-defining features to be designated and consistent with 3.3-02.05 of the Salinas Municipal Code. And then I'll open up to questions.
Are there any questions from the board?
I sort of have a question about giving my okay for this as a historical resource in that, as some people said, it seemed like, you know, it was evaluated in '89 to be a historical resource, and it wasn't. And now that I haven't seen the inside of it, but I walked by and I saw some corrosion on the fins, the marquee, and the undersealing. And I was just wondering, I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable giving it my stamp of approval until I sort of walked through it and looked at it on the inside. So I'm wondering if that's possible or if it's appropriate or what.
That's a good question. I mean, it's certainly something, I mean, we could facilitate a tour. I don't know if that's appropriate in making this decision. I don't know if Grant has.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the criteria that's needed for evaluating it, as Jessica outlined. I don't think a site visit is one of those criteria. So we've done our review as staff, and the historic consultant has done their review, and this is the ultimate determination that came out of that.
So maybe if you review again the resolution that is being asked to be discussed, then maybe that'll be clearer for you.
I guess it's just to give it an okay to say we think that it's a historic resource. Yeah, based on all the criteria.
So is that what you're...
Yeah, so we're just, our review, so there's the other application, so what my review and what was presented as the documentation for the consultant is we're reviewing it against the California Register. Does it meet this criteria? And then looking against the integrity, location, design thing. So we're looking, but in terms of evaluation of the significance and whether or not it's designated, it would be against the California Register. Does it meet the following criteria? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in terms of, I mean...
I just want it to be noted that I have a concern about how the outside doesn't seem to be, you know, like I mentioned, it's corroded, it has duct tape, painted over duct tape, and some other things, and I'm just, you know, I'm worried that it's not going to be properly, because in the report as I viewed it, they weren't going to, they were going to make changes on the inside, but they weren't making any outside changes. And that concerns me. I mean, I know that it's a historic resource. It meets the criteria.
Right.
But what they're planning to do, and I don't know if it's, you know, in my purview to mention it, but I just want to note that, you know, it seemed like for the time that they've had it, they're not mentioning that they're going to fix those things.
Well, also, I think it's had a couple owners since 1989. So if I understand correctly, so it isn't the same person who's had it all these years. Plus, remember, I think that's part of what the Mills Act may encourage, is once the designation happens, then we move more forward. Once the city gets Mills Act growing again, I would think the owner would want to apply for that. And that would help with those expenses, the metal worker mentioning. And
Under special circumstances, the interiors could be added for the design of the building. Normally, it's only the envelope and the style, and to maintain the historical determinal features that is maintained from the original design.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I guess it would just
the
be,
interiors.
I guess it would just be my recommendation that they did, you know, tear that out and have some kind of specialized way of customizing the marquee so that it looked right, because it's not right now at all. It has to be fixed. It can't just be with duct tape and then the duct tape painted over. So just my recommendation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they
and,
do that, because I didn't see that on their plan of things to do.
Well, through the chair, totally appreciate the concern and the comments, and that is something we can relay to the property owners as they continue to work on their restoration efforts.
Yeah, and also the tiles on the outside, there's some are damaged.
When I first joined the HRB, I voiced a concern about maybe the condition or the restoration of the El Rey Theater. And I was told then that it's been reviewed already, or it had been reviewed. It was a project that was ongoing, and I said, well, it's been reviewed, then, we have no concern about that. Or it was being taken care of. That was essentially what the impression I got when I first joined. So,
Yeah.
is it a historic it is, it's on the survey.
Right.
And
This
so-
is officially designating it. Yeah.
But the conditional use permit or restoration, is that being reviewed by, who is reviewing that?
So current planning is reviewing the conditional use. So they are reestablishing the commercial recreation use. So they have to go through that conditional use to reestablish the use and to open it as potentially like an event venue. They'll have movies, still have a theater. So that's being reviewed independently by current planning, and then I'll have my opportunity to enter comments.
Then would that be reviewed by this board?
If they're not making alterations to the exterior of the structure, then more than likely it wouldn't come before HRB. It would be dependent on the scope. And as of it, right now, there's no major modifications to the exterior that they're proposing.
How long has the current owner owned the building?
Current owner? Let's see. That's a good question. I know I pulled that, but I can't remember. It hasn't been very long. It hasn't been more than a couple of years, I don't think.
Yeah, it was in some of the paperwork. I
Yeah.
seem to recall it was like 2020 or 22.
Yeah, I don't think it's been very long.
So, I mean, they haven't been working on it very long at all, right?
No, yeah, and it's going to be it's a long process. They've been working on it for.
Is there a plan, do you know, for any new ventilation or what is it?
HVAC?
Yeah, the new ventilation system, because many of those older buildings, they have water damage or things like that. And so I'm wondering if they're planning to upgrade that.
Yeah, so that'll be part of, so once they get their designation and they get the CUP approval, they'll have to submit building permits. And so that'll be another chance for us to look at it, for staff to see what their, because they'll have to, they'll go through and do building permits for so that would be looking at modifications in the interior, but they're gonna have, it'd have to be brought to code.
Question?
No, I just need to recuse myself from discussing and voting on it.
Okay, thank you.
Worked there before.
Did you get that note?
Pardon?
When we do roll call, you'll,
Oh, yes.
right. Is there any other question that the board might have? I'm just sort
I
of
have one.
curious. Go ahead.
I want to recuse myself because I was involved in 1984 on that building.
I think mine was 82, so.
There you go.
Do we have public comment before?
Yep.
Any
Public comment?
any public comment on this subject, public hearing?
Do we have to make any motion?
Well, I just have one more question. Do you have any idea, why suddenly they decided to make it a historic designation?
Yeah, as part of the conditional use permit and the work they're doing, they want to be able to apply the State of California Historic Building Code, and it has to be designated to do that.
Okay, very good, thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the designation of the building located at 361 Main Street as a historic resource in accordance with the section 3-02.05 of the Municipal Code? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I second it.
Did you get those people? Okay. Is there any other discussion about this motion? We have a roll call, please.
Board Member Callender,
Yes.
Board Member Masgai,
Yes.
and then Board Member Munoz.
Abstain?
Okay. Board Member Shim.
No.
Okay. Board Member Wadsworth.
Recused.
Okay. And then Chairperson Hirahara.
Yes. Okay, moving on to other business, our future agenda items. So you have any update on the Mills Act? Or Mills Act?
Yeah, so we had a meeting with the city manager, interim city manager, and city attorney Chris Callahan, and we're just talking about the financial ramifications. And so we decided to move it to the April agenda so that we're going to have a packet essentially ready for council for you guys to review at the April meeting. So that we're going to have to work with our finance director to work on the tax implications, excuse me. And so we just wanted a little bit extra time, but we'll move forward in April with our recommendation that'll go to council.
Any other agenda items to be talked about in the future? Jessica?
Can we formalize a subcommittee for recognitions of buildings that have been, being restored or reused, historical buildings?
Or the plaque committee?
Yeah,
Okay.
Make it official so we can have meetings and, make a proposal to the city and the body.
So could those meetings be held Zoom? Subcommittee meetings
That's something I'd have to check on.
or committee meetings?
Okay.
Subcommittees?
Yeah.
Yeah, we should have asked Chris that half an hour ago. But we'll follow up
I
with him
thought
on
he said no, oh, that was
formation
for
of subcommittee.
training.
That's something else.
Oh,
But
okay.
wasn't it if you had no more than 3 members together, you're okay?
Yeah, I think the committees are separate than the council.
Right.
and-
So if we have 3 or less in the committee, then I
We'll be
think we
okay.
can meet at a coffee shop or someone's home or wherever we want to meet. It's not a board meeting.
So could we ask for volunteers for the plaque committee, no more than 3?
I thought we had established a committee. I'll have to look at that. I thought that had been established.
I don't remember that there were volunteers for that.
No, I know that I was one of them.
Okay.
Somebody else wasn't there.
Okay.
And so we need another 2 so we can,
Okay.
start working on it. Yeah.
So I'll be part of it.
Yeah.
And Jessica, is there a template or something that from the city's direction, I know it's been discussed for a long time, is there something so we can work with that?
I went to our city clerk and asked if we had anything. And the only template we have is like the proclamation that city council does. So we would be starting from scratch. There was no example of some sort of certificate.
So it's my understanding the train museum presentation will be next April?
That's correct.
And
Yeah.
who informs them that they'll be doing that?
I'll facilitate that through Denise.
Okay, thank you.
So are we able to then put on the agenda for the next meeting what we've come up with the plaque committee?
Yeah, if
So
you,
next meeting, you can do a
So-
report.
yeah, if you, reach out to me. So I post, Thursday before. So as long as I get it before then I can put it on the agenda.
Okay.
And it might be a future agenda item as far as there was some questions about the consultant for the master plan for the train station.
Yes, and so I had asked for an update. As far as I know, they were working on the contract, and I don't know anything beyond that. If has it been executed?
So that's being coordinated by our Economic Development Division, and they sit next to Jessica and me, so we can follow up after lunch and
Okay.
get that answered.
Because I'm not sure what the report back status of these consultants are, or how often they do that, or what is their policy.
We have one more question over there.
Excuse me.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to report about, I wanted to follow up about the art contest idea for getting people involved in knowing about the Mills Act. And I formed kind of a contact information list that could be accessed. Actually, you could put it on the website, and it would be like a form where people who are interested, this would give all the information about when the application is due and when the submission is due and what we kind of expect in terms of the art piece. And then anybody who was interested, they could put their name on it and their email and what district they're in, what school they go to, the medium they're going to use. And it can be accessed on the website. It could be just a little form. So that, because there's no reason really to have an art contest unless people want to do it. So this would be a way to find out if they were interested and, and what they're going to do.
And that would be in tandem then once the Mills Act is up and running, right? We don't want to come participate, but it's not in effect yet. But it's exactly the kind of direction we need to encourage.
Well, it's a pilot program. Yeah, so
Right.
we're trying to,
Exactly. So you're doing the homework so it can, once the green
Yeah.
light happens, we can
Yeah.
do it,
it couldn't be done until the Mills Act is
It's
actually,
not functioning, so I'd be disappointed. I mean, we assume it's going to function, right?
Right.
But we kind of want to wait till it does
Yeah.
to start it, because you've just spent so much time getting it, all this research done, and it would really be disappointing if the Mills Act doesn't happen.
why wouldn't it happen?
It should.
I mean,
Yes,
it would,
officially. it has to
We
be
need
official.
it to officially happen, is what I'm
Yeah.
getting at.
Yeah.
Will there be awards for this, and
yes.
what would they be, and
yes.
how would they be funded,
I said that
and
there
when
would
would it
be
take place?
awards and, there would be criteria for judging it. And then, it's just mainly having the community have an awareness about the Mills Act, because why would it be up and running if people don't know about it?
Well, I'm just thinking if you're going to get children, presumably,
I
students
wanted
working
to kind
or-
of limit it to high school age, college age,
Oh, I see.
yeah, not
But
children.
would there be a reward for this? Is there an incentive to do this other
Well,
than just
I
historic interest?
I said that we could give prizes, we could give cash awards.
Because we currently have no budget, correct?
We have no budget for it, but another thing we could do is we could apply for the Monterey Arts Council, and they always have grants, and ask them to sort of fund for the prizes.
Well, they could also have an exhibition of
Yeah, the exhibition
finalists.
ones, but they can't have an exhibition if they don't know, like, when the application is due, a time, and when the submission is due. That's why I sort of made it more concrete than just, it'll happen when it happens.
So the concept of the Arts Council, are they aware of this?
I've
Opportunity.
approached the director, but I haven't really gotten her blessing about it.
Yeah.
Because this might be a part of the general plan update when they do the survey. Because I look at the 1989 survey, there was actual, a lot of drawings that were done for that
Yes.
telling about the styles that were appropriate, so maybe that might be a conjunctive use, so. But how does city staff want to deal with this?
Do you want me to just submit this to you for consideration, as it were?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if it's going to do that, yeah.
You could change it.
Well,
You can make a different date. You could say yes or no, but if there's nothing sort of concrete about it, it'll just, people won't know about it and they won't want to do it. They might not want to do it anyway, but this at least will give people an opportunity to know whether they want to or not.
Yeah, so just work through Jessica and me, and we'll keep working with you on it.
Who should I give it to, you or Jessica?
I'll take it.
So is there any public comment about this discussion for future agenda items? Or follow-up reports? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
Okay, all those in favor of adjournment, signify by
Aye.
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 It's unanimous. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned 1 o'clock. Thank you.